The rain fell in relentless sheets that evening, drenching the streets of New York City, turning the sidewalks into glistening mirrors reflecting the neon lights of towering skyscrapers. Jonathan Reed, the CEO of one of the city's most powerful investment firms, had spent another grueling day buried in endless meetings and high-stakes negotiations. Power, wealth, influence, he had it all. Yet as he stepped out of his sleek black car into the chaos of the storm, he felt a hollow emptiness gnawing at him, one that no amount of money or accolades could fill. As he strode toward his penthouse, building a movement on the curb caught his eye. A frail, shivering figure huddled beneath a thin, torn coat, her small hands clutching a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Please help." Paused. Unusual for a man whose schedule left little room for the unexpected. Something in her posture, the way her eyes peeked out from under a tangle of wet hair, struck a chord deep within him, stirring a sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. Without thinking, Jonathan approached her, the storm soaking him as well, and knelt beside the girl. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice cutting through the roar of rain and passing traffic. She flinched at the sound, pulling the coat tighter around her shoulders. I'm fine," she whispered, but the tremble in her voice betrayed the lie. Jonathan hesitated, torn between the urgency of his own life and the undeniable need staring back at him. "Come on," he said finally, extending his hand. "You can't stay out here. Let's get you somewhere warm." She looked at him, eyes wide with disbelief, almost as if expecting him to vanish like everyone else had. But something in the genuine concern etched on his face nudged her to take the hand he offered. Moments later, she was seated in the passenger seat of his car, the rain dripping off her hood onto the leather interior. "My name's Emily," she said quietly, still wary. "And you're—" Jonathan smiled faintly. "Jonathan, Reed. Let's get you somewhere warm first." By the time they reached his penthouse, the storm had eased to a drizzle. Emily's small frame was dwarfed by the opulent apartment, the towering ceilings, and the golden light spilling from the chandelier. She sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her gaze darting around as though memorizing every detail in case it was a dream. Jonathan disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with a warm blanket and a plate of food he had quickly prepared, though perfection was usually his obsession. "Eat," he said simply, setting the plate in front of her. She hesitated, then took a bite. The warmth of the food thawing not just her frozen fingers, but also some of the walls she had built around herself. "You didn't have to do this," she murmured, eyes still wary. Jonathan shrugged, a faint humor playing on his lips. "Yeah, I did. Maybe I just saw someone who needed help." They spent the evening in silence, a rare calm settling over the apartment as the city lights twinkled beyond the glass walls. Jonathan, for the first time in years, felt the heaviness in his chest ease just a little. Emily, despite the cold edges of the world that had hardened her, felt a flicker of trust forming for this man who had rescued her without a second thought. Over the next few days, Jonathan found himself drawn into Emily's world, a world he had never encountered. She was quiet, observant, with an uncanny ability to notice things others overlooked. She had lived hardship, but carried herself with a grace that intrigued him. Jonathan's friends and colleagues noticed a change in him, subtle but unmistakable. He smiled more often, lingered in moments he would usually have dismissed, and most dangerously, found his thoughts drifting to Emily even in the middle of board meetings. Emily, too, was navigating unfamiliar territory. She had spent years mastering the art of survival, keeping people at a distance, hiding in plain sight. Now she found herself living amidst wealth and luxury she had only ever imagined from the cold sidewalks. The apartment felt like a palace, the food like a banquet. Yet the kindness Jonathan showed her made it feel more like home than she had ever known. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner, Jonathan asked lightly, trying to pierce the guarded walls around her, "Why were you out there, Emily? Not just today, but out in the cold alone?" She looked down at her plate, stirring. Absent-mindedly, I had nowhere else to go. Sometimes people just forget you exist if you're not part of their world. Jonathan's chest tightened at her words. There was a story here, one that was buried beneath layers of hardship, pain, and perhaps pride. "Well," he said finally, a faint smile breaking through, "you're part of my world now. At least for as long as you want to be." She looked up, the first genuine smile flickering across her face. It was small, hesitant, but it reached her eyes, warming him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew. Emily adapted to the rhythms of Jonathan's life, while Jonathan learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the small joys, and the perspective Emily brought into his high-powered world. Yet despite the warmth, a tension lingered. Emily had secrets, fragments of a life she never spoke of, things she had hidden even from herself. And Jonathan, despite his growing feelings, couldn't ignore the shadows behind her eyes. One rainy afternoon, while they were walking through Central Park, a sleek black car screeched to a stop nearby. Out stepped a man in an impeccably tailored suit, his presence commanding the space around him. Emily froze, her eyes widening in shock, the color draining from her face. Jonathan's brow furrowed in confusion. The man approached, his gaze locking on Emily, and he spoke with a voice that was firm, yet laced with disbelief. "Emily, is that really you?" She looked at him, panic and recognition warring in her eyes. Jonathan stepped closer, instinctively, protective. "Who is this?" he asked, a flicker of tension in his voice. Emily's hand trembled as she let it slip from Jonathan's grasp, her lips parting in a whisper. "Father." Jonathan blinked, struggling to comprehend the scene. Unfolding before him, the man's eyes softened as he took in Emily's appearance, then turned sharply to Jonathan, assessing him in a glance that held authority, judgment, and curiosity all at once. "I suppose introductions are in order," the man said finally, his gaze returning to Emily with a mix of pride and relief. "This is my daughter, the one I thought I had lost to the world." Jonathan's mind raced. The girl he had taken in, fed, sheltered, and begun to care for deeply, was not a random beggar, as he had assumed. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest, most influential men in New York City. The realization struck him like lightning, a mix of awe, disbelief, and a twinge of betrayal, not from Emily, but from fate itself. Emily looked at Jonathan, her eyes wide, a mix of fear and apology shimmering in her gaze. I didn't. Tell him I couldn't. I just needed to survive." Jonathan swallowed, processing the revelation, feeling the weight of every shared meal. Every quiet conversation, every stolen glance now reframed in the context of her true identity. The man extended a hand to Jonathan, his expression unreadable. "I see she's been in good hands," he said finally, the faintest hint of a smile breaking through. Jonathan shook it, the magnitude of the situation settling in. He had entered Emily's life thinking he was saving a girl from the streets. But fate had shown him that in reality she was saving him from the emptiness he had carried for so long. And as Emily stood between the two most important men in her life, Jonathan realized that his feelings for her went beyond kindness or fascination. He was falling in love with someone whose life was now a world apart from the one he knew, but one he was more determined than ever to be part of. That evening, as the three of them left the park together, the city lights reflecting on wet streets, Jonathan felt a thrill of uncertainty and anticipation. The path ahead was unknown, filled with challenges, expectations, and societal scrutiny. Also, a spark of hope, connection, and the promise of a love that neither money nor status could define. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The revelation of Emily's identity reverberated through Jonathan's mind like an unrelenting storm. That night, as he sat alone in his penthouse, the city's lights shimmering against the windows, he replayed every detail of their time together. The girl he had sheltered, the girl whose laughter had brought unexpected warmth to his life, was not just someone in need. She was the daughter of one of the richest men in New York. The weight of that truth made him question everything: his intentions, his feelings, and the path ahead. He had thought he was acting out of compassion, yet now he wondered if his emotions had crossed into something deeper, something he wasn't sure he was prepared to confront. Meanwhile, Emily was facing her own turmoil. Her father, Richard Langston, had been the image of perfection in her childhood, demanding, distant, yet protective in ways only a man of immense wealth and influence could be. Years ago, circumstances had driven her into hiding, forcing her to live a life she had never imagined, sleeping on streets, hiding her identity, learning the rawness of survival. Now, standing before Jonathan, the man who had shown her kindness, without a second thought, she felt exposed, vulnerable, and terrified of what the future might demand. Her father's presence, while comforting in some ways, reminded her of a life she had abandoned, a world of expectations she wasn't sure she wanted to return to. The following days were a whirlwind. Jonathan tried to reconcile his feelings with the reality of Emily's world. He saw the glimmer of fear in her eyes whenever her father appeared, and noticed the subtle tension whenever they were alone. Emily, on the other hand, struggled with guilt and gratitude in equal measure. She had begun to care for Jonathan in ways she couldn't articulate. The thought of leaving his world or of being discovered by society in a way that might shame her terrified her. One afternoon, as Jonathan walked through the private gallery of his penthouse, he found Emily sitting by the window, staring out at the skyline, her fingers tracing the condensation on the glass. He approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "You've been quiet today," he observed. She turned to him, eyes glistening, and said softly, "I'm scared. Scared of what comes next. Scared of losing the one person who saw me for who I really am." Jonathan took a step closer, his gaze firm yet gentle. "Emily, I don't care about your wealth, your family, or the life you've hidden from the world. All I know is that I care about you. That hasn't changed." She looked at him, a mixture of relief and fear flickering across her face. "It will. Once my father knows everything, once the world knows, things will be different." Jonathan reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes, we face it as a team. I'm not walking away." Her lips trembled, and for the first time she allowed herself to truly lean into the warmth of his words. Yet fate had its own plans. That evening, Emily's father called her to his office in a skyscraper overlooking the city. She arrived, heart-pounding, only to find herself in a room filled with the kind of luxury she had once known as a child, but had sworn never to reclaim. Richard Langston studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Emily," he began, voice firm, yet tinged with concern, "I've been trying to find you for years. And now that you're back, I need to understand why you disappeared, why you didn't reach out, and most importantly, who has been influencing you during." This time, Emily swallowed, realizing she couldn't hide anything from him now. "Father, I had no choice. I needed to survive. And I met someone, Jonathan Reed. He's the one who helped me when I had nothing." Richard's eyes narrowed, slightly studying her intently. Jonathan Reed. His tone carried a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "The CEO?" Emily nodded, her heart racing. "Yes, he saved me, Father. He didn't know who I was, and he treated me like a human being." There was a long silence, the kind that carries the weight of unspoken emotions. Richard leaned back, his fingers steepled, eyes reflecting both admiration and contemplation. "I see," he said finally. "You found someone who sees you for who you truly are. That's rare. But Emily, you need to understand the complexities of being his partner, given the worlds you both inhabit." Emily felt her throat tighten. "Father, I don't care about wealth or power. I care about Jonathan because he cares about me. He doesn't judge me, doesn't expect me to fit into a mold, just sees me." Richard studied her for a long moment, then sighed, a subtle smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "You've grown into a remarkable young woman. If he truly cares for you, I won't stand in the way. But know this, his world and ours, they're not the same. The path ahead will test both of you." Meanwhile, Jonathan had been grappling with his own challenges. Word of Emily's true identity had begun to spread through social circles. Whispers of scandal and intrigue following the trail of the mysterious girl who had appeared in his life. Some colleagues eyed him with curiosity, others with skepticism, wondering if his intentions were genuine or opportunistic. But Jonathan ignored the murmurs, focusing solely on Emily, determined to navigate the challenges ahead. He arranged a private dinner for the two of them, the city lights twinkling beneath them, and looked into Emily's eyes. "I know things have changed," he said gently, "but I want you to know nothing about how I feel has changed. We can face whatever comes together." Emily reached for his hand, feeling the steady warmth of his grip. "Jonathan, I'm scared. Scared that this world, my family, everything, will tear us apart." He shook his head, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Then we make our own rules. We define what matters. You and me were stronger than any expectation, any secret, any obstacle." And so they held on to each other, hearts entwined, facing a future that was uncertain, but filled with possibility. But the world outside had other plans. At a gala hosted by her father that weekend, Emily was introduced as Richard Langston's daughter, and the whispers began. Photographers captured her every move. Journalists speculated about her mysterious disappearance, and the city's elite began to take an interest in Jonathan's sudden involvement with Emily. The pressure mounted, forcing Emily to confront the duality of her existence, the life of a struggling girl she had known, and the wealth and expectations that now surrounded her. Jonathan, unwavering, stood by her side, shielding her with quiet strength and resolve. Their relationship, tested by scrutiny and expectation, only deepened, their connection growing more profound as they navigated the chasm between two very different worlds. One night, Emily confided in Jonathan, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "I've never had someone see me for who I truly am. Not my father, not anyone. But you saw me. And now, I don't know if I can go back to being the girl I was, or fully embrace the life I have." Jonathan cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "Emily, you don't have to choose between worlds. Choose yourself, and anyone who truly matters will follow that. We'll figure it out together." In the days that followed, Emily began to bridge the two worlds, reconciling her past struggles with her present reality. Jonathan became not only a protector and partner, but also a guiding presence, helping her navigate the complexities of high society while never losing sight of the humanity that had brought them together. Yet, as their bond strengthened, subtle tensions arose. Some in Richard Langston's circle questioned Jonathan's intentions, wary of a powerful man entering the life of a billionaire's daughter with no social pedigree, while Emily wrestled with fear that her past might tarnish the life she had been given. Through it all, the pull between them remained undeniable, a magnetic force defying scrutiny, skepticism, and societal expectation. And then, one evening, after a particularly tense board meeting, Jonathan turned to Emily, his expression serious but filled with warmth. "Emily, we've come a long way, and the world has thrown every challenge at us. But there's one thing I need you to know. I'm not letting anything come between us. You and I are stronger than anyone else's opinion, any rumor, any obstacle. Are you with me?" Emily, her heart swelling with emotion, nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Always," she whispered. And in that moment, as the city lights flickered around them and the night embraced the skyline, Jonathan and Emily realized that they were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were a team, a force, and a love story that would defy the odds, whatever came next. But fate, as always, had one more twist waiting. Something that neither Jonathan nor Emily could have anticipated, a revelation that would shake the foundations of trust, test their bond,